I tried to eat it straight, and I was on camera. I put it in my mouth, and I ended up spitting it out.
You're listening to Inside Israel Today with Gil Hoffman on the Land of Israel Network.
Hello and welcome to Inside Israel Today here on the Land of Israel Network on thelandofisrael.com. I am here still giddy this morning from where I went last night. Last night I had the honor and the privilege of being the representative of the Jerusalem Post at the Feast of Exotic Curiosities that took place at the Biblical Museum of Natural History, which is in Beit Shemesh, a quaint, sunny town about an hour and a half away from Jerusalem with traffic, and I'm told 25 minutes when there's not. And it was this amazing meal that was put together by the head of the museum, Professor Natan Slifkin, in which we ate extraordinary food. We will soon speak to him on the line, but first I will read you from the menu so you can be jealous. We had appetizers of a smoked kingklip fish brought from South Africa. We had what is termed kosher oysters with pearls, and we will discuss with the rabbi what we mean by that. We had fried kosher bacon and eggs, and again we'll discuss with the rabbi what we mean by that. We had a salad of the 7 species of the Bible. We ate a pastilla pastry with dried fruit, carrot cream, and pheasant. We had figs stuffed with musovy duck. We had slow-cooked udders in almond milk. We had a makluba, which is a potato, rice, or wheat, and meat dish. It was with the meat being guinea fowl. And we had roasted water buffalo, Asian water buffalo with festive rice, and for dessert, we had crispy fried locusts and sugar. All this prepared by the best chef in Israel, Moshe Basson, from the best restaurant in Jerusalem, Eucalyptus, which is located across from the old city walls of Jerusalem, where I had the honor and privilege of getting married. And so we have on the line to quell and tell us the background of these wonderful foods, Rabbi Slifkin. Good morning and welcome to Inside Israel Today here on the Land of Israel Network.
Hi, good morning. Great to be on the show.
Okay, so please give us some background. Why did we have this wonderful meal last night?
Well, we opened the Biblical Museum of Natural History 3 years ago. And last year we had the idea of celebrating our 2nd anniversary with a feast of biblical flora and fauna, foods from the Bible that are not normally eaten today, like quails and goat and deer and so on. And so last year we did biblical foods. This year we wanted to do something a little different. So we decided to do unusual kosher foods that are not in the Bible.
And indeed, they were very special. I actually want to start out, if I'm going to be asking you about a series of different foods, I want to ask you about the one item that you told us is not necessarily kosher, which we had available to take home, which is a little bit of coffee beans in a little jar that is supposed to be the most expensive coffee in the world, in part because it has been swallowed, digested, and excreted by an animal called the Asian palm civet.
Right.
Please tell us about this.
Okay, so the civet is it's a mammal that looks kind of like a cross between a cat and a mongoose. And it's claimed that the coffee beans that they excrete are improved by the digestive enzymes that they absorb while passing through the digestive tract of the civet. So the question is, though, is it kosher? Because normally a food that's a product of a non-kosher animal is itself not kosher. But this isn't exactly necessarily a product of the civet. It's a coffee bean that's just been slightly altered. So it's not entirely clear if it's kosher or not. It's not exactly a question that's been studied a lot. So unlike the other things in the menu, we didn't feel comfortable saying definitively that it's kosher, which is why we gave it in take-home packets with instructions to ask your local Orthodox rabbi.
I will indeed be asking my local Orthodox rabbi. I have presented it to my wife, who graciously allowed me to leave home to attend a 7-hour meal that was preceded by an hour-and-a-half drive to Beit Shemesh. So let's work backward. I must confess, I loved everything at the meal except for a couple things that maybe we'll start with to get them out of the way.
Okay.
I couldn't do it on the locust.
Come on.
At a meal similar to this about 8 years ago, I did in fact consume a locust that was wrapped in a buffalo kind of cold cut.
Right.
Whereas this one I tried to eat it straight, and I was on camera, which I think maybe added to the tension. I put it in my mouth, and I ended up spitting it out.
Oh dear. Well, it's hard. I know the first time I had a locust, also it was tremendously difficult. But
you ate it last night.
Oh yeah. Not my first. It wasn't my first locust.
And why would anyone eat a bug, Rabbi?
Well, in a few reasons. In antiquity, if you have a plague of locusts wiping out everything, so you're going to eat locusts rather than starve to death. So it's very nutritious. More recently, it's a cultural thing in many African countries. It's considered to be a delicacy. It's the bamba, the bisley of these countries. And in the future, they say that as the world population increases, it's going to be exceedingly difficult to produce protein from cows and chickens, which are not very economically effective. So they say that insect protein is going to be the future.
That is the future. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the only other item that I tried that I did not like, and fellow Land of Israel network host Eve Harrow also said this, she was not a fan of it, was the slow-cooked udders in almond milk.
Yeah, I will confess that I had a hard time with that one too.
Now, but this is special. You're eating meat and milk together.
Yeah.
Which Judaism normally does not allow. Why does it allow us to eat an udder?
Well, the law is you have to squeeze out the milk of it first, which was done when it was prepared. But there is apparently a certain taste of milk still residual there in the udder. The idea is that, as we discussed last night, that for everything that's not kosher, there is a kosher equivalent. So a couple of the items on the menu were echoing that idea. Hence, we had the meat and milk, which was the udders. We had the bacon substitute, and we had the kosher oysters.
Okay, so the bacon substitute, as long as we're going out of order here, which is fine. Tell our listeners here what that was.
So that was something called dulse. It's an algae.
Can you spell that?
Dulse. Okay. So it's a kind of seaweed, which is it's red in color. So when you fry it, it looks kind of like bacon, and apparently it even tastes like bacon. Never having eaten bacon myself, I can't attest to that.
There is a person who was at my table,
yeah,
who will go nameless, who has eaten bacon in her life, and she said that you did a good job in recreating the taste.
Really interesting. Okay, okay, that's good to know. So yeah, so that was the bacon, and then the oysters.
Now the oyster was very special. I brought home to my daughter the most beautiful oyster shell that there was. The fact that you served something resembling an oyster, which was an oyster mushroom, on an oyster shell, was very special and very aesthetic. How can we eat off an oyster shell? That seems to be the most unkosher thing possible.
Right. So the reason is, there's often a lot of surprises when you study the laws of kashrut, and because the shell is not considered to be part of the flesh of the oyster, not considered to be the food product of the oyster. So there's nothing wrong with the shell. You can eat food off oyster shells as long as they're cleaned. And as you noticed last night, we also had ground up oyster shell available to sprinkle on it. You can eat the oyster shell. It's sold sometimes as a calcium supplement, and it's perfectly legitimate to eat it. Did you sprinkle any oyster shell powder on your oyster?
I did indeed, and I enjoyed it very much.
Great.
Now, this was served together with one other appetizer, which is a king clip fish.
Yeah.
The woman who takes care of my children when I'm off here working is from South Africa.
Ah. Mm-hmm.
And she was very impressed. She said that the king clip is a very appreciated where she comes from in Durban, the coastal city there in South Africa. How did you get it, and how do we know that the king clip is kosher?
So the king clip is only known to people in the extreme southern hemisphere. So it's only gonna be South Africans and Australians who are familiar with it. And when it was, the thing is, for a fish to be kosher, a fish has to have fins and scales. Now, the scales on a king clip are very hard to find. They're beneath a layer of mucus, and the scales are very, very thin and transparent. So originally, the king clip was thought to be not kosher, and then when they found the scales, it was accepted as being kosher, which was, a delight for Jews in South Africa because it's such a delicacy there. And then what happened is that although when people first brought it to Israel, people tried to claim then that it's not a kosher fish because they couldn't find the scales, and they made a huge kosher controversy. And what happened in the end was many rabbis in Israel declaring it not kosher, but the rabbis in South Africa still insisting that it is kosher.
And the rabbis in South Africa were the experts, and the rabbis in Israel weren't as familiar with the fish.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
But in the end, they found a compromise?
The compromise was that the rabbis in Israel declared it kosher, but not kosher, not mahadrin.
Not strictly kosher.
Right.
Which would mean that some people would eat it and some people still would not.
Right.
And the South Africans basically went along with it, kind of surrendering to the bigger rabbis over here in Israel.
Right, but all the rabbis in South Africa still, as far as I know, they all still eat it quite happily.
That's good, and I ate it quite happily, Rabbi.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in the next course, we had, when people go to Eucalyptus, which really is a great restaurant, two of the highlights that they have there are pastilla and stuffed figs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you go there normally, that pastilla and those figs are stuffed with either chicken or beef, the most common animals that we eat. But at this meal, the figs were stuffed with musovy duck, and the pastilla was filled with pheasant.
Right.
Now the pheasant is a very expensive bird. They're very special. They're very valiant, honorable bird. Having this pheasant at our meal was very special.
You're talking about the pheasant that you ate, or the live pheasant that we
both
that we brought around?
I mean, I actually saw a live muscovy duck earlier in the day. I took my daughter to a local petting zoo, and that same colored duck came up to her to play.
Oh yeah, great. And
this was interesting bookends on one day.
Right. So with pheasant, there's a lot of birds that are kosher, but which are not normally eaten. In today's industrialized society, we just eat chickens and cows. But there are traditions that certain other birds are kosher too. Traditions that were in danger of dying out. So it's important to keep these traditions alive, which is why we wanted to serve the pheasant. A very expensive bird, not normally practical to farm and for people to eat, but a bird that nonetheless, there's a strong historical tradition that it is a kosher bird.
Now, you can tell us about this disaster that you had ahead of the meal involving the pheasant.
Yes. So like I say, we acquired some pheasants at great expense. And one of the many animals that we have at the Biblical Museum of Natural History is a coati. A coati is, he's in the raccoon family from South America. And this particular coati was found wandering around Jerusalem. Someone's illegally held exotic pet that had escaped. And the Nature Reserves Authority asked us if we'd take it in, which we did. It kind of fits into one of the themes we teach at the museum. At the museum, we focus on teaching about how the animals of the Bible are the animals of the land of Israel, not the animals from other parts of the world. It's the animals of biblical lands, but it's the animals of the land of Israel in biblical times, which is, lions, cheetahs, crocodiles, hippos, and so on, not the animals that you'll find in Israel today, which is cats and minor birds and Australian parakeets and a lot of introduced species, including the occasional coati. So we have this coati. She's a fantastic animal. As you saw her when we brought her in last night, a lot of personality. But she does have a taste for pheasants. and she somehow managed to stick her arms out through a cage, grab a couple of the pheasants, and decapitate them.
And that makes them not kosher, doesn't it?
Right. Yes, it does make them not kosher. So
and that made
was
the meal even more expensive.
Yes, we had to quickly, search around Israel to find somebody who could sell us some more pheasants.
How did this was a fundraiser for your museum, right, Rabbi?
Somewhat. Oh, it was a very expensive event to put on, so it wasn't.
Yeah, I figured you put a book out.
Yeah,
it wasn't
a major fundraising event. More of something to do for our supporters. Something to do for the publicity, the educational value of it, and so on.
Did you make money off this meal?
Not very much.
Well, one thing that perhaps made a little money is that they did auction off an item that is probably the most surprising thing for me of last night. I had never known, and I've gone to one meal like this before, I had never known that the piranha is a kosher fish.
Right. So what we found when we give tours at the museum is everyone expects, we have it, as you saw, we have a piranha an exhibit, and everyone expects it to be not kosher because they see it after having gone through the exhibits of the kosher status of mammals and birds, where with mammals and birds, you see very clearly that predators are not kosher. So people assume that the same is true with fish, but it's really not the case. For a fish to be kosher, it just has to have fins and scales. And the reason why there's no concept with fish of predators being not kosher is that almost every fish in the world is a predator. What else are they going to eat? Not much plant life in the ocean. So, a tuna fish, which people think is this, innocent little round fish that nibbles the grass. It's not. It's a gigantic, voracious predator. So, a fish, the only reason why sharks are not kosher is that they don't have scales. Nothing to do with their being predators. So, a piranha is in fact kosher. And hence
this
its
piranha
appearance at dinner last night.
This piranha was auctioned off. There wasn't enough for everyone. It was quite a small fish, and different
it was a baby piranha.
Attending the meal competed in an auction, and a fellow from New York named Harris Back purchased this piranha for $1,500 and enjoyed it with his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And afterward, they said, when I asked them how it was, but after they said it was good, they said it tasted like any other fried fish.
Oh.
Which, after you purchase a fish for $1,500, I would think you would have to say, even if it wasn't, even if it really did taste like any other fried fish, lie, okay? Say it was the best fish I've ever had in my life, and I got to eat it, and you didn't get to eat it, and I'm special, and you're not. But these are.
I think the uniqueness of it comes from saying that you ate a piranha.
Exactly. Now, I want to ask you, behind the scenes, was there a second piranha that you ate?
Nope. No, but they did give me very kindly a little bit of theirs, so I got to taste it.
That is very nice. And how did you think about the fish? Was it better than any fish you ever had in your lifetime, Rabbi?
You have to realize I'm from Manchester, so I have a pretty bland palate. So gourmet dining experiences are kind of wasted on me.
Wow. So I want to give you an opportunity here now that we've gone through. Oh, wait. Save the best for last. The best item served at this meal was the roasted Asian water buffalo.
Ah, yes.
And the chef, Moshe Basson, carried out this buffalo. I've had a large turkey before.
With the help of a few other people, he carried it out.
Yes, he carried it out on a tray with a few other people, like basically on a stretcher.
Yeah.
And then carved it with love on what was not a table, it was a python cage.
Well, it was a table. It was a display cabinet that had been in the last few weeks. We had to turn into a python cage because the python had outgrown his regular cage.
Okay, good to know the background there. But to witness this buffalo being carved above a python was certainly an experience of a lifetime.
Did you also notice the buffalo on the wall overlooking it?
I did not notice that there was a buffalo over the wall. There was a hippopotamus skull next to the carving. But a buffalo on the wall, even better. And then eating it, wow. Even though I was already quite full by then, eating it, this is a delicious, delicious animal.
Right, it is. Just to straighten out a misconception that some people had, this was not a buffalo that was captured from the wild. There are some buffaloes in the Chula Nature Reserve, but this buffalo was one that was raised on a farm. There's one moshav in Israel where they raise buffalo for their milk products. So this buffalo was a farmed buffalo.
A farmed buffalo. You know, as someone who celebrates Thanksgiving, both American and Canadian Thanksgiving, even though I'm not Canadian, and even though most Canadian Jews do not celebrate Canadian Thanksgiving, I do. I think that there ought to be one day a year where everyone gets together over a buffalo and thanks God for creating such a delicious and beautiful animal. So now that we've gone through the whole menu, I want to give you a chance to plug your museum, Rabbi. This is a very unique place. If you could make the way all the way to Beit Shemesh, and I've exaggerated a little bit in how long it takes to get there. They've built a road that's now much faster. It used to be, I'm told, even harder to get there. But those of you who can make your way out to isolated Beit Shemesh, tell them about your museum.
Okay, so firstly, I have to say it really is not so isolated. I don't know why it took you so long. It takes me only 40 minutes to get to Jerusalem. We have that new road there from the main highway. So the museum, we display the animals of the Bible, a combination of live animals and taxidermy. It's a guided tour that enables people to get a full understanding and to really get up close and personal with all the animals. You get to handle lots of different exotic animals. And it's a very, unique aspect of Jewish identity. You normally see Jewish identity in terms of, synagogue prayers, things like that. You don't think of it in terms of hyenas and crocodiles and pythons. So at the museum, we present very vividly how that's also an aspect of Jewish identity. Lots to learn about the animal kingdom and the exotic members of the animal kingdom. And people love it. Thank God. We've had 30,000 visitors so far. We also offer now live online class tours of the museum for people who aren't able to attend in person, people abroad.
Online, how do they get to your website, Rabbi?
Well, we do it, that's arranged through groups. We have synagogue groups and so on in the United States who arrange live online classes from the museum. Museum's website is www.biblicalnaturalhistory.org. Bit of a mouthful, but that's what it is, Biblical Natural History. And that gives more details about the different types of programs we do at the museum.
Well, I certainly recommend learning about the biblical natural history of Israel. I learned a lot last night from you and from the whole presentation. I didn't know that this year, besides being the anniversary, 100 years since the Balfour Declaration, is also the 100-year anniversary since Israel's last bear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people don't realize what kind of animals used to live in Israel. You had lions. Up until the early 20th century, there were ostriches, there were bears, there were cheetahs. There's still a couple of hyenas and leopards left in Israel. This is part of the biblical wildlife.
Well, being from Chicago, I'm a Bears fan, and I don't know when they had bears in Chicago. And right now, the Bears are not very good, but I will always appreciate a bear and certainly a cub. Rabbi, thank you so much for coming here on Inside Israel today on the Land of Israel Network, on thelandofisrael.com.
Okay, thank you very much. It was great being on the show.
Pleasure. And listeners, thank you for being a part of a great show here where we learned about the exotic curiosities that were served last night at the Biblical Museum of Natural History. I encourage you to go to that website, to biblicalnaturalhistory.org, and when you're in Israel, include that on the itinerary of your tours of this wonderful land. Perhaps one of the hosts here on the Land of Israel Network, Eve Harrow, she's a great tour guide. You can book her as your tour guide on a trip, and she can take you to the Biblical Museum of Natural History. And the folks behind these Masorah meals, they're called, meals that try to keep alive the traditions of the special meals, of the special animals that we've been eating over time. Ari Zivotofsky, a professor from Bar Ilan University, and Ari Greenspan, a dentist from Jerusalem, they're planning another one next summer. And being a part of a meal like this is the experience of a lifetime. So listeners, thank you for being a part of this. And if you want to see my experience trying to eat a locust last night, you can go to the landofisrael.com website. It's there. Laugh at me. It's okay. Have a wonderful day from here in Jerusalem. Bye-bye.